Hey, today's topic is going to be about talent and it not being an excuse to not work. So, I'm one of those guys who does believe that there is talent in competitive disciplines. So, for instance, I do believe Life and Tasia are the two most talented players to ever play StarCraft 2. I believe Nada, Flash, Jaedong, Savior, Bisu, all these guys, all these top level players that were in Brood War were all talented in their own ways, in very specific ways. But here's the point: is I acknowledge his talent, but I don't acknowledge the excuses that people make up for not working. And what I mean by that is, whenever I talk about talent, there's always this like pushback, as in saying, "Oh, are you saying that hard work doesn't matter at all?" No, I don't mean that at all. Because you have to refine your talent. You have to put in the work to make your talent work. There are very few players that can have talent and not put in a lot of work. Like the only one I can think of straight up is Tasia. Like we can talk about Nada a little bit if you want, because basically Flash says Nada didn't practice as much, but that's according to Korean standards. Like I don't know what he means by not practicing a lot for a Korean, right? So, and also like when Flash was talking about Nada in that interview, I had Korean Mulan translate. Basically, this is like in like Nada's like post like hard days of work, so it's not like Flash could have seen what he was like before then either. So basically, in very rare circumstances, are you going to have somebody so talented that they don't need to work? But for the majority of the competitors, the majority of people, practice and work ethic are incredibly important. And like it doesn't matter how talented you think somebody else is, or how incredible or how lucky you think they are. On some level, they had to refine that talent. On some level, they had to put in the hard work. On some level, they had to figure things out. And the reason I'm saying this is because for somebody with no talent, it doesn't affect you at all, or it shouldn't affect you at all. Basically, even just thinking that thought is just slowing yourself down. What you should really be thinking is you should be thinking about your self improvement. The person you have to defeat is yourself from yesterday or yourself from the day before. And maybe you're not able to do it. Maybe, for instance, yourself yesterday is better than yourself today, but yourself tomorrow can still beat yourself yesterday or something like that, right? And the way I think about it, the way I think about talent and hard work is, yeah, talent is great, and you're gonna get guys that have both talent and hard work, like Cold Zera, Nico, Simple. All three of them seem like guys that have this. Though I think Cold Zera sounds like the craziest of the three, if we're just talking about hard work. But even if they do have it, that doesn't mean they can't be beaten. That doesn't mean on your day, if you put in the work, if you refine the way you play, you can't beat them. Now, that doesn't mean you can always beat them, but this is a competition. Upsets happen, and anybody can be taken out. Like, that's basically the mantra I've learned when watching, like, somebody like MVP from StarCraft 2. This is a guy who never gave up, who never surrendered, who always found a way to win despite overwhelming circumstances that everybody could have said was justified if he didn't put in the work, if he didn't put in the thought, if he just gave up midway. Because this is a guy with incredible injuries in his worst matchups against some of the best players, against the meta itself, like the most imbalanced meta of all time in StarCraft 2. So that's the way I think about it. And this is from a quote from like QXC, and this is a guy you're not probably never gonna heard of. That's pretty funny. But basically, QXC was a low tier StarCraft 2 player, but he had one of the most interesting insights into the ideas of how you have to perceive balance as a competitor. And what he said was, you as a player can understand that there is perhaps an imbalance in the game, but you as a player can never acknowledge this imbalance. And the reason you can never acknowledge this imbalance is because there is like a percent chance that you will mentally check out if you think you cannot win against another player because of their race. Therefore, you can never think of the game as balance and imbalance. You you have to think of it as he can do this. So what can I do to get around it? What can I do to beat it? What can I do to prevent this from even happening in the first place? And that's always something I've admired about QXC's mental process, about the way he thought of the game mentally speaking, because that's an incredible mindset to have. Because for the player, except for StarCraft 2, ironically, it doesn't really matter how much you complain or how much you whine. It's not going to help you win. It's just going to usually slow you down. Now, there are certain types of players that actually this does help, and that's why the competitive disciplines are so complicated, because it's on such a personal, individual basis. We're talking about exceptional types of people to get into a competitive level anyway. But there's some types of players, like famously Life and Tasia, were both like this, where they could complain, but it was just a way to like get rid of their frustration, maybe. And then when they got into the game, none of that shit mattered anyway, right? It didn't affect them like it did somebody like Idra, famously. So this is about that's about all I really wanted to say. Is basically talent exists, but so does hard work. And even if you run into a guy with both talent and hard work, you can beat him. Basically, that's the point. So long as you are honing your own specific talents, honing your own way of playing the game, honing your own efforts, and most importantly, never giving up. And I think that's the most important thing. That's the driver of everything. That's something I talked about in like the competitive mindset you have to have as a player, and I feel like that's the most important like deciding factor as to whether or not you make it over the hump, is that will to never give up, because that's going to give you the most chances. So for instance, I'm pretty shit at basketball, so I'd probably say it would take me like 20 times to hit a 3-pointer, right? But if I only gave myself like one shot, then I'd never make it. But if I gave myself 1,000 shots, 10,000 shots, eventually one of those fuckers are going to go in, right? So that's kind of the point of talent and hard work. Is talent and hard work. Talent is a boost, but you have to refine that talent in order to become a winner. And at the same time, even if you don't have it, if somebody else is slacking off, you can get past them. And even if they aren't slacking off, there are other ways you can win, especially in a team game, because a team game has multiple factors you're talking about. So for instance, a weaker player this is a good one. So let's talk about Chris J. Chris J is the current leader of Mouse Sports. And when we talk about Chris J I'll go back to the Nico Sports era. When we talk about Chris J in the Nico Sports era, he was probably the second best player on the team, but he was very inconsistent because he was the main, and that's a problem when you're the main opper. And the other problem was like the rest of the guys were not there, basically. And so when you looked at Chris J, you thought, okay, maybe he could be like a third level star. Maybe he could be the main opper, but like the problem with Chris J as the main opper is you would probably never get to a world-class team with Chris J as your main opper. And so basically what happens is Chris J now has shifted towards being the leader of Mouse Sports and being the entry fragger of Mouse Sports. And for whatever reason, this fits him as a player, because when you think about the resources he's given now, because as an opper, he was basically given like resources of like a 2-player, which is basically like a secondary star. But as an entry fragger and as a leader, he's being given the resources of like a 4-player, which is he's basically taking the role nobody else wants. It's semi-sacrificial in the sense like he's the guy going in first, and if he dies, the whole point of him dying is he's creating space for the other guys to trade him, right? And basically as the 4 role now, he has been able to be one of the best in-game fragging leaders in CSGO. And so all of a sudden, for his role, for what he's doing for his team, he's one of the best, even though he individually is not at a level to play as a star role. But he, as a player, has been able to like find the right teammates and find the right role for himself to be a champion. And that's kind of the way I'd put it. All right, so that's it for this one. See you guys later.